Hi, Sal.
Hi, Anya. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
Been
Yourself?
a few months, a few crazy months since we last
Yes,
talked, huh?
yes, yes.
Well, I'm really happy that we're able to connect again. I think everybody here wants to hear the story of how Khan Academy first got started. Would you mind indulging me with that tale?
Oh, well, it goes back to 2004. I was a year out of business school, living in Boston. My first career was in tech and in math, or in computer science. But then after business school, I found myself as an analyst at a hedge fund. Family was visiting me in Boston after my wedding. It came out of conversation. My 12-year-old cousin was having trouble with math. Her name's Nadia. I offered to tutor her, and she agreed. And so, it was remote tutoring. She went back to New Orleans, which is where I was born and raised. And slowly but surely, she got caught up with her class, a little ahead of her class. At that point, I became what I call a tiger cousin. And I called up her school and I said, I really think Nadia Rahman should retake that test from last year. And they said, who are you? And I said, I'm her cousin. And they let her. And that same Nadia who was put into a slow track was then put into an advanced track. So I was kind of hooked. I was like, this is cool. I'm connecting with family and it seems like it's helping them. And so I started tutoring her younger brothers. And over the next about year and a half, 2 years, word spread in my family that free tutoring was going on. And so before I knew it, I was, 10, 15 cousins, family friends around the country I was working with every day after my hedge fund job. And, my background in software, I immediately started seeing patterns that a lot of my cousins, the reason why they were having difficulty was they had gaps in their knowledge and they just needed a way to practice that. So I started writing software for them to practice whatever gap in initially math and then in things like physics and chemistry. And that was the first Khan Academy. It was a piece of software, a web app that I was creating back in 2005 for my cousins. And it was a friend that suggested at a dinner party that, why don't you make videos to complement this software? And I initially thought it was a horrible idea. I thought, YouTube, which is what he recommended me uploading it to, was for cats playing piano. But I got over the idea that it wasn't my idea and I gave it a shot. And those kind of took on a life of their own. It soon became clear that people who were not my cousins were both watching the videos and using the software. By 2007, 2008, I felt like, hey, this maybe could one day become a real thing. And so I set it up as a not-for-profit with a mission of a free world-class education for anyone, anywhere, which at the time was a little delusional. I mean, I was in this, I was operating by myself initially in a guest bedroom, and then later in the walk-in closet where I am right now. So everything's come full circle. But by 2009, I frankly had trouble focusing on my day job. There was about 50 or 100,000 people using Khan Academy every month. And I said, the social return on investment here just feels off the charts. We could one day reach tens of millions or billions of people. And so in 2009, I quit my day job to start Khan Academy for real. And, that first year was tough. Whenever you do any type of entrepreneurship, social or for-profit, I think you start with a little delusional optimism and then the world kind of humbles you a little bit. But then by the end of that year of stress, of kind of living off of savings, we got our first real support. And since then, we've just been growing our team and trying to grow our impact and grow the resources that we have as a nonprofit to do this type of an effort.
A free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. That promise has just grown so much in impact, even in the last year since we've been hit by the pandemic. And tell me about how the number of people that you've reached has grown. And I also understand that you guys have been running even ahead of the support that you've been able to attract over the last few months.
Yeah, free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. It's arguably it's not just our mission, it's arguably the mission of like the global education system as well.
Yeah.
And, over the last 10 or so years since, my story left off, we had grown pre-COVID to about 100 million or so registered users. About 20 million were coming per month, taking some form of learning action. Some of these were kids who just needed help in one topic, while a lot of it, about half of our use is classroom usage, where these are teachers using Khan Academy to let kids learn at their own time and pace, fill in gaps. Teachers get information on where they can focus their interventions. But then, COVID hit, and it was one of those moments where you look left, you look right, and you say, I think this is us, because people are going to need something that is accessible, that covers multiple subjects and grades, that's trusted, that can be used at home by families and students, but also works with standards and what teachers care about, and had teacher tools for it. So we saw our traffic grow by, it ended up being about 250% of normal. And normal school day, we were seeing about 20 million learning minutes a day, actually about 30 million learning minutes a day. And now with COVID, we were seeing closer to 80, 85 million learning minutes per day. And yeah, we've just been trying to stay ahead of this. We were running a deficit, so we were already digging into our reserves a little bit pre-COVID, and that's why some of my time is spent raising money. But you can imagine our server costs went up. We're trying to accelerate things, and I told our team, look, we just have to do whatever's right now. Hopefully, the universe will conspire to support Khan Academy. And some people have showed up, but we still need more help. But yeah, we've just been running as fast as we can, trying to keep up and running more, webinars for parents and teachers. We've been putting out learning plans. We've been trying to provide a perspective of what good distance learning looks like above and beyond Khan Academy. How do you do it with video conferencing? How do you make sure kids get enough social interaction and time for play and recharging? So yeah, it's been an interesting several months.
I mean, I don't think many people could imagine that, this kind of need would open up to kind of swallow the mission that you've been on for over a decade and a half. And I think the social entrepreneurs who are listening to this really can appreciate the real talk that some of it is about, first of all, setting out a really key mission, such an important mission, and then also having to work hard to make sure people remember and support it. I do want to talk about something that maybe is a little tougher. Part of the MIT community, Justin Reich, has just put out a book called Failure to Disrupt. And it's really about the gaps between some of the promises of the ed tech world, primarily the MOOC revolution, but also something that Khan Academy was part of, the promises that were being made towards the end of the 2010s of the 2000s versus what we're actually seeing today in terms of transformation of education. And I wonder, what are your reflections on that? I mean, where do you wish that things could have gone differently, or where do you think that they need to go now in terms of technology's actual ability to change how education is delivered, not just quantity, but quality?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of things that have been happening over the, and sometimes we get grouped with the MOOCs. We're a little different, and they're doing really great work, I think, as well. But I think there's a few things that have actually borne true over the last 10 years, and there's a few things that I think have been slower than I think any of us have wanted to. When I gave that first TED Talk back in 2011 and talked about personalization and mastery learning, and this notion that, look, we move kids together lockstep, they miss 20% on some test, and then we just move on, and we ignore that gap, and those gaps accumulate, and at some point they hit a wall. It resonated. No one has ever intellectually told me that's the wrong idea, Sal. It's good to leave those gaps there. It's good that we, and I think every teacher will tell you that is why so many of their kids struggle with, say, grade level work, because they have gaps pre-grade level. I think what has been a learning for me is, even though everyone has kind of intellectually agreed with these ideas, and now the tools, Khan Academy of the world, exists. Once it's different than MOOCs. MOOCs are kind of a course replacement. Khan Academy is ideally meant to be used in conjunction with what happens in a classroom, but it's hard. There's just a lot of inertias in place for a teacher to just overnight move to a world where everyone is learning at their own time and pace. Even if it's not possible, how do grades work in that world? It's just not used to. Traditional lesson plans don't necessarily work as well in that type of a framework. And so that's why over the years, we have been doubling down a lot more in how do we work more closely with school districts? How do we make sure we meet all the kids so we can support teachers, provide training, integrate with their IT systems? That's kind of boots on the ground work that I think really needs to happen to get really integrated with the systems. Now, the wins that have happened, and I would include MOOCs and other things in this, is that if we were talking 15 years ago, just the notion that anyone on the planet, if they were so motivated, could at least access their potential, that would have seemed utopian. That's actually kind of true now. Now, the big caveat is they have to be motivated to do so, but they're there. All the tools are there. There's incredible stories. There's a young girl in Afghanistan who used Khan Academy to kind of self-educate herself once the Taliban kept her from going to school. She smuggles herself into Pakistan to take the SAT, and now she's doing quantum computing research once she got political asylum in the US. So there are those people, but I think the next decade's the hard work of how do we get it really systemically integrated so that it can reach all students, maybe some students who might not start with that point of high motivation. I think all kids can be incredibly motivated, but sometimes they've lost it for whatever reason. But how do we re-engage them? How do we re-engage their teachers? And how do we make it work really well with the systems that already exist?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So would you say that what what wasn't as apparent in the early days was really the need to work with the existing system and to help it all progress together?
Yeah, the hope for Khan Academy is some folks, we got these very hyperbolic headlines in the early days. And I know, Anya, we met, very early days of Khan
Yeah.
Academy, where all these headlines were coming out. My favorite one was, I think it was the San Francisco Chronicle wrote "The Math of Khan." I'm a Trekkie, but there were other ones very hyperbolic. And, I think the people like to create this narrative of like, oh, tech disruptor gonna like, serve it to the incumbent institutions, Amazon.com versus Barnes and Nobles, Airbnb versus hotels. That was never my view. For me, it was always, okay, there's this pedagogical ideal of personalization, of allowing people to fill in their gaps. We really need to move the dial for kids, because there's been decades of education reform, but we haven't seen the dial move the way that we need to, and especially for the highest need kids. And so our view, the tools I was building for myself, I first used at Sidwell Friends School in 2007, before I even quit my job. And then in 2010, we started with a local school district out here in California. So the view was always, how do we work with physical classrooms? And I've been saying for 10 years, if I had to pick between an amazing teacher and amazing technology, I would pick the amazing teacher every time. Now, hopefully we don't have to make that trade-off, that we can have amazing technology in service to an amazing teacher, in service to making a more human classroom. So hopefully we can get there, and this isn't an either or proposition.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, I'm just struck reflecting on the kind of incredible disruption that's taking place right now, and the role that Khan Academy and other technology companies might have in really envisioning something pretty new for schools in the 2021 school year and beyond.
There's a lot of interesting, you mentioned, I mean, COVID is an actual disruption, not
Yeah.
in the trendy Silicon Valley notion. It's an actual disruption. I'll be the first to say, very suboptimal. A lot of people say, oh, you're Mr. Distance. I'm like, I'm not Mr. Distance Learning. I'm kind of like, I want to be Mr. How do we make learning better? And technology is a tool. And it's a very suboptimal situation, but it is forcing some really important conversations. How do you make learning not bound by time or space? It's no longer this ideal that Sal's talking about in some TED Talk. It's literally what we have to do right now.
Yeah.
How do you personalize in a world where some kids have been engaged over the last several months and will be over the next several months? Some kids will not. How do we bring them back into the system when it's time to come back? How do you do assessment in a way where it's hard to authenticate, where it's not about seat time anymore? It's really about what level do you get to? And so I have a project that I'm working on outside of Khan Academy. It's a separate, probably set up as a separate nonprofit, schoolhouse.world, to pair students with volunteer tutors and also provide mechanisms to prove what you know. And actually the highest proof of what you know is that you're capable of tutoring that thing. And we're already talking to university admissions offices who are saying that's really interesting to us. And so, expect to hear something in the not too far future about universities using evidence like that above and beyond your traditional measures.
I love that you have a side project. Like, you're not busy enough.
I always have side projects.
I feel like that's a great segue into the advice that you might have for this incredible community of striving social entrepreneurs who are, on the younger side and just getting started and have such big dreams.
Always have side projects. I mean, I'm somewhat serious about that. I would say always have a primary project that you can like devote yourself to, that you believe in, and that you can work hard on it, whether it's for profit or not for profit. You need to pay the bills sometimes, but don't let that be your entire life. And I was very blessed when I was working at a hedge fund, because the stereotype in the financial industry is that you work yourself to death, so to speak. But I had a boss who told me, look, our job is to be investors and to make good decisions and to avoid bad decisions. And the best way to do that is to have time to recharge, to do other things. So he says, I view it as your job, Sal, to stop working after the markets close or an hour after the markets close and do other things to broaden your perspective. And if I didn't have a boss who was so forward thinking, when my cousin was having trouble in math, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to say, hey, I can help you. And I wouldn't have had the opportunity to start coding some software for them And so, you're never gonna be able to innovate in your life and try new avenues in your life if you don't have a little bit of that breathing room, so that you can explore your passions. And then that gives you some space, so it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Sometimes people have to do very scary things of like give up, and I had to do it at some point, but you want to de-risk it. But you can work in a traditional job, whatever that is, build your skills, build some savings, and then when the moment feels right with your passion, and there's always going to be a little bit of a leap, a little bit of a jump there, but you'll have a lot more skills and hopefully have de-risked the situation a bit, but it'll still be risky.
You make it sound graceful and exciting, and I know it's going to be so inspiring.
It's exciting, but not graceful. It's definitely not graceful.
Maybe in retrospect it is. But thank you so much, Sal. It's been really great checking in with you.
Thank you, Anya.